beekeeper for over 10 years and served as vice president of the Brown County Beekeepers Association for 5 years. She promotes native plants and is the chair of the grant committee for the Green Bay Wild Ones, and she leads environmental projects as the chair of the Stewardship and Resources Committee for the Wapaka Channel Lakes Association. She participates in native bee citizen science programs statewide, and she supports native bee conservation, and I believe she got an award for the work she's done with youth program, getting youth involved in beekeeping. I'm happy to present Julie Mazzoleni.
Really a great crowd, and thank you all for coming to listen to me talk about bees, because there's really nothing more that I love to do than to talk about bees, and most beekeepers will say the exact same thing. As Wendy mentioned, I've been involved with bees in some way or another for 10 plus years, and I started out as a beekeeper for 10 of those years, and truth be told, I'm not a beekeeper any longer, but I do mentor people to help them keep their bees alive. And that's just as fun, and it's a lot easier than being a beekeeper myself. So we're here to talk to you about bees today, and I'll explain to you a little bit about the amazing honeybee. Honeybees are absolutely really amazing creatures. We'll talk a little bit about who else is in your yard that you're going to be seeing this spring. So this is a great time of year to be talking about bees, because you're going to start seeing them in your yard. And my hope is that you leave here today and you'll start to really see who's out there and start to recognize the bees and the pollinators in your yard. And then I'm going to touch on what we do matters, and then what we can do to try to help our pollinators today, not just native bees, but all of our pollinators. So before I really get started, I'd like to just ground everybody and remind everybody what pollination is. So pollination really is, for plants, it's every organism on this earth wants to procreate, right? Everything wants to reproduce. So it's really the movement of pollen grains from the male anther onto the female stigma. That's what pollination is. And so what is a pollinator? A pollinator then is any animal, not just bees, but any animal that will move pollen from the male anther to the female stigma. And that's what helps us get our fruits and vegetables. And seeds, basically. So approximately 3/4 of all of our world's crops and flowers and vegetables are pollinated by some kind of animal. That's 3/4. That's a lot. That says that we need our pollinators to stay safe. The other 1/4 is through wind and water pollination. So who are our pollinators then? It's all of them. It's bees, flies, butterflies, moths, bats, beetles, ants, even if they're climbing up into a low flower and climbing down and moving pollen that way, and hummingbirds. But bees are our most important and vital pollinators because they feed almost exclusively on honey and on nectar and pollen. All the others are just kind of incidental. They're visiting the flowers and plants because they want the sweet stuff. They want the good stuff. They want the nectar there. Bees are truly our critical landscape architects. Without bees, our world will look completely different. So let's talk, before we start, let's talk a bee versus a wasp. Because when I talk about bees, I'm talking about a bee. I'm not talking about a wasp. And they're completely different critters. Although bees, they are descendants from wasps. And if we go back even here, and this, where we are right today, and we go back about 144 million years ago, there were all kinds of primitive insects that were flying around, and some of those were wasps. There were also lots of primitive plants, but plants look very different than they do today. At that time, they needed to produce an exorbitant amount of pollen and hope upon hope that a pollen grain would go and be wind-blown onto a light plant, and that plant would be pollinated. At some point in time, like their protein, it's their meat source. Where nectar basically is their carbohydrate, it's their energy source. So pollen is extremely nutritious. So that wasp ate a little bit of that pollen, and it probably fed a little bit of that pollen to its larva. And there started an evolution between plants and bees. The bees' bodies began to change, and plants also began to change. Plants were thinking, this is a much more efficient way than having to produce all that pollen. I'd rather have an animal move my pollen grain to a like plant. So plants evolved. They developed a sweet treat, so the nectar, their petals started to change. Bees started to change. They got hair in their body, and their bodies changed shapes. So native plants and native bees evolved together in order for them to both survive. Wasps are carnivores, they're meat eaters. Bees today are they're vegetarian basically. They survive only on pollen and nectar. So when we talk about bees, there's a common misperception out there that there's one species of bee. And that species of bee is yellow and black. It stings. It's cared for by old men in funny white suits, and they live in a hive, and that's basically the honeybee. But truthfully, honeybees are not native to North America. How many of you knew that? Honeybees are not native. They were brought here by settlers in around the early 1800s. And they were brought here for 3 reasons. Who can name one? For the honey. Yeah, obviously they wanted the honey. The second reason is because of familiarity. They were familiar with honeybees. They felt like they're bringing a piece of their home. So they were familiar with it. And the third reason is, who would know what the third reason would be?
Candles.
Right, wax. Very good. Wax. We needed candles back then, so they wanted the wax. And there's a fourth reason that I just read about not too long ago would be mead. How many know what mead is? Mead is, yes, alcohol form made out of honey. I mean, I'm sure they wanted to self-medicate back then too. So producing mead. So honeybees are not native, and before the honeybee, and right today, there are about 4,000 different species of native bees that are here in the United States and in Canada that are native. These are our native bees. There are about 400 different species just here in Wisconsin. So that's just, bumblebees and mason bees, carpenter bees, leafcutter bees, sweat bees, and I'm going to talk about these as I go a little further into my talk. And they're all different shapes and sizes, right? Some are really large and some are really tiny. So know that the honeybee, though I'm going to talk about the honeybee is not native to North America. So, how many of you would recognize a honeybee if you saw it? Would you? Is this a honeybee? No. Oh, raise your hand if you think this is a honeybee. This is a fly. What about this? Is this a honeybee? No. Who thinks this is a honeybee? This is not a honeybee. How about this? Yes? Yes. Yeah, raise your hand if you think it's a honeybee. That is not a honeybee. How about this? Is this a honeybee? No. No, it's not a honeybee either. How about that?
There.
No, that's a wasp. That's not a honeybee. Everybody knows what that is, right? Yeah, that's the dreaded wasp. All right, how about that? Is that a honeybee? Yeah. Is that a honeybee? That is not a honeybee. That's another fly. How about that?
Yes.
You know what that is.
The bumblebee.
It's a bumblebee. It's not a honeybee. Right. How about that?
Yes.
That's the cutest bee up there. Honeybees are adorable. They are really like flying little teddy bears. They're really cute. So that's honeybees. Honeybees are managed by beekeepers. Like I said, they were brought here, and they are managed by beekeepers like me. They are critical in the United States today for our agricultural stability. We need to have them here now. They are actually transported all around the United States on semis in their hives all year long. So they're down in the southwest, down in Florida for citruses and avocados and such, all the way up to the northeast, through the Midwest, through Wisconsin for apples and cherries, all the way through, and they end up in California in February for the largest pollination event in the world. Who knows what that is?
Almonds.
Almonds, that's right, almonds. It's the largest pollination event in the world. Lots of beekeepers send their honeybees over for the pollination, for the almond pollination. And even hobbyist beekeepers will send their honeybees over there for this event. So we do need to have honeybees here. So what's happening to our honeybee? You've heard of the colony collapse disorder, and that started in around 2006. You've heard of colony collapse disorder? Colony collapse disorder started when a man opened up his hives and there were no bees in there. Actually, there were bees. There was one bee. It was the queen bee, and there were all kinds of larvae, but all the bees had left. And so usually if bees are going to die, you'd see them all at the bottom of the hive, right? Well, these bees were just gone. And they described it as colony collapse. It was described as colony collapse disorder. There's been a lot of research, and there continues to be a lot of research on what causes colony collapse disorder. But there are three main reasons. One is really nutrition, monocropping. So monocropping is just, we drive through Wisconsin and we see these lovely fields that are just miles and miles of corn or soybean or such. That's monocropping. That would be just like us just eating an apple. So bees need to have a variety of food. And they can't also, not every plant has, quality pollen. The protein level in the pollen can be different. And corn and soybean is a lot lower. And I'm not just trying to pick on those two, but, so it's nutrition, poor nutrition. The second one is pesticides. We use way too many pesticides here in the United States. And it's causing a lot of issues with our pollinators. And the last one is diseases and viruses, and for the most part, that's coming from the varroa mite. Varroa mites came into the United States from Asia, and around 1987, and it didn't take long for them to spread through our honeybee hives. And it's basically a bug on a bug. They're a parasite that lives and feeds off of a honeybee. And it's not just the fact that they're living off of the honeybee's body, and it's called the fat body, which basically is the fat on the honeybee. It's that they're also transferring diseases and viruses into the honeybee and making them sick. So you've got sick bees. Bees are not going to just be sick and die in the hive, they all fly off. And that's one of the things that happens with colony collapse disorder. If beekeepers are not managing the varroa mites in their hive, and all hives today have some level of varroa mites, but if they're not managing the level of varroa mites in their hive will die. It just will die. And it won't make it even until to December. It's not like you're worried about it getting through the winter. It'll die before then if you're not managing your varroa mites. So that is the number one problem with honeybees right now, is trying to learn how to manage the varroa mites and also pesticides. So let's talk about honeybees. Honeybees are considered to be social insects. They live in a hive like this, and we can have between 20 and 60,000 bees in one hive, and they live in that nest year-round. The honeybee is considered to be a superorganism because they make decisions as an organism, not one bee. The queen bee does not make all the decisions. That beehive makes a decision as a whole together. And no one bee can live on its own. They need each other in order to survive. It's like the cells of your body they are there for your body. The same thing is with when you think of a colony of bees, honeybees. They have age-related division of labor, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The whole hive is said to respire. It breathes, kind of like a cat breath. It breathes, they bring air in and they suck air out, in and out and in and out. They have a reproduction. When I talk about honeybee reproduction, I'm not talking about the single bee. I'm talking about the hive as a whole. It literally bursts a new hive. So we've got a new hive that is reproduced with a new queen. And then the hive thermoregulates. So the inside of that hive will stay consistent between 93 and 95 degrees. It doesn't matter if it's, 112 outside. It doesn't matter if it's 20 below outside and windy and blowing. It's going to stay constant between 93 and 95 in that hive. And the bees do that when it's cold by clustering in a ball around the queen, and they kind of unhook their wings and they vibrate their flight muscles. And when they're in that cluster, the outside bees go in and the inside bees go out, so they're constantly doing this, and they keep the inside of that cluster really nice and warm so the queen stays safe. And that's how they survive through the winter. In the summer, you'll see a load of bees that are outside when it's really hot out, and they're fanning air through, keeping the air circulating through the hive. Some of them, when it's really hot, they'll all just hang out on the outside of the hive, and they'll just to make more room inside the hive so there's less bees, less bodies basically inside the hive. So superorganisms, they are really amazing. So there's 3 castes. There's the queen. How many queens in a hive? One. There's the drone, and the drones are the males. And there's the worker bees. So the worker bees are females. So let's talk about each one of these because these are really interesting. There's one queen bee, like I mentioned, just one queen, and her primary function is to lay eggs, and she can lay up to 2,000 eggs in one day. One queen, that's the only thing that she has to do in that hive. She lays 2 kinds of eggs. She lays a fertilized egg, and she lays an unfertilized egg. The unfertilized egg will be the male. They're called haploids. They have all of their genes that come from the mother. And then the fertilized eggs are the females, are the worker bees. She does have a stinger, but she rarely uses it, and her stinger is not barbed. So if I had her in my hand, she wouldn't sting me, and if she did sting me, she could just remove her barb, and it doesn't stay in my skin. So that's the queen. So let's move over to the drone, the male. So drones make up only about 10% of the hive. There's very few that are in there. Their main role is basically to mate with another queen from another hive. That's basically all they do. They just kind of hang out. And they beg for food from the worker bees. And they'll hang out near the bottom of the hive. And they'll want to go fly off. And what's called drone congregation fields. And it's a mystery today what causes a drone congregation field. But it's an area out somewhere where drones tend to congregate and they wait. They fly around out there. And a virgin queen will fly through there and he will mate with her. And once he mates with her, he basically dies, he's done. And that's it for the male. He dies, that's what he's basically there for, right? That's all he really wants to do. Then if he doesn't get lucky, then he goes back and sits back in the hive and hangs out there with the rest and waits for a new day. Then we have the worker bees. And the worker bees, these are all female. 90% of the hive are all female. They do not have active reproductive organs. They can lay eggs, but they don't normally unless it's a specific situation. If they did lay an egg, it would be an unfertilized egg, so it would be a drone. But they usually don't do that. If they are doing it, then you have a problem in your hive. So they have a division of labor. So when they first hatch, when a worker first hatches, the very first thing she does is she is considered to be a nurse bee. And that really means that she cleans out her own cell and she takes care of the queen. She will groom her, she will feed her, she removes her excrement. We can usually see these bees surrounded the queen because they're taking care of her. They also take care of the larva and make sure the larva has the food that they need. So those are nurse bees. They get a little bit older, and then they're what we call a house bee. And house bees are the bees that they'll go down to the bottom of the hive and they'll collect nectar from the bees that are coming in from the field and in their mouths. So they transfer it and they bring it up and they place it into the hive cells, the cell body of the hive. And so that's basically what they're doing. They're going up and they're going down throughout. They're also cleaning the hive, making sure there isn't anything in there that shouldn't be in there. If there's any dead bees, they'll clean those dead bees out as well. So that's the hive bee. Once they're a hive bee, they get a little older and then they become the guard bee. So guard bees, as you can imagine, have never left the hive. So these bees have never left the hive. And they're fat and they're happy and they're really healthy. These are the bees that when I crack open a hive, they're the ones that are going to let me know they don't want me there. Or they're the ones that are going to be hanging out and down at the bottom of the hive. And when they get tired of having me there, they'll let me know it. And usually they let you know because they'll just kind of fly out and they'll bonk me. They'll just bonk into me, run into me. They don't sting me or try to sting me. I'll start hearing and feeling that they've had enough of me in the hive. For the most part, honeybees are actually really mild-mannered, so I don't see this very often, except for if I'm just in there a little bit more. If it's a hot day, they don't want me there. They'll let me know they don't want me there. And those are usually the guard bees that come out and try to get you to go away. When that happens, you just close up the hive and just go away and leave them alone. So the guard bees, once they're a guard bee, they get a little bit older, they become a field bee. And these are the bees that are going out and they're collecting water, they're collecting pollen, they're collecting nectar, and they're collecting also a tree sap called propolis, and they use that to kind of stick everything together. So at this point, they've only got about 2 more weeks to live. And we'll see those bees flying back and forth, and many of them have tattered wings and they look really tired out. So you know when you're out, you're seeing honeybees on your plants, you'll know that those bees really don't have that much longer to live. Honeybee worker bees in the summer only live to be about 6 weeks, only live for about 6 weeks. In the winter, they need to live about 6 months, and I'll get into a little bit how that works. So that's the worker bee. Worker bees do have barbed stingers. So when they sting you, that barb stays in your skin, and then that poison keeps pumping into your skin. That's what makes it so painful. So no one likes to get stung by a bee. So that's a picture of the drone, just a close-up picture of a drone. You can see his body's kind of barrel-shaped. He's big. He's got these huge eyes because he's mating in midair. He needs to see that queen come through. This is a worker. This worker is just hatched. She's fuzzy, very fuzzy, lots of hair. At the end of their life, and then when they're in there flying the last 2 weeks of their life, they're pretty much bald. They don't have much fur on them anymore at all. She's just the young one. She's really cute. All right, and there's the queen. She's got this long-shaped body. So this queen, she can't fly when she's in her full reproductive ability. She gets big like this, and her wings are too small, and she can no longer fly. She flies once, really, when she goes off and mates. And then if the hive decides to split, she will need to lose weight, and then she flies again. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So I did talk about the fact that there are 3 castes in the hive. But she lays 2 kinds of eggs. How do you suppose that happens? How do we end up with 3 types of bees, but she lays 2 eggs? Any thoughts on that? Food, right? It's for the food that they're fed. So when the hive decides that it's time to split, to divide, to actually birth a new hive, that queen will lay an egg in a special cell. When she lays an egg in that special cell, it triggers the bees to feed that particular egg royal jelly. When you start out, it's an egg is an egg is an egg when it's fertilized, but when it's fed royal jelly, it becomes a queen with fully functioning reproductive organs. Okay, so now you know everything about bees. Who can pick out the queen here? Anybody? No, I'm kidding. You can't. I don't even know if she's there. She could be. All right. So, I gave my how do bees communicate? Pheromones. So it's dark inside there, right? Absolutely everything in that hive has a pheromone. The queen especially has a pheromone. So I could have like 20 hives side by side that look exactly the same. Bees will know, those worker bees will know where to go because of the pheromone of that queen. They'll know who is their queen. The amount of brood inside there has a pheromone. Everything in there tells a story.
What's the pheromone?
A pheromone, a smell.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
the way it smells.
Okay.
Yes, very good. So everything has a smell. Everything has a type of an odor. They touch. So you can see these 3 bees here. They're touching their antennas and they're probably sharing a drop of nectar or some pollen. They're communicating with each other. I don't know what they're saying, but they're talking, and we can see this happening quite a bit. And they communicate through vibration. How many of you know about the waggle dance? You want to demonstrate?
Yeah.
The waggle dance is the figure. The waggle dance is they actually vibrate their bodies in a figure 8 in the hive. I don't know. Can I get Wi-Fi here, or do I have?
You can.
Oh, that's all right. I won't try. I've got a lot to get through. If we can get to it, I'll get to it later. But basically, they vibrate their bodies in a figure 8. And there's enough research on honeybees. Scientists can read what that means. Basically, it's she's telling her sisters where the goodies are, where the water is, where the flowers are, where the patch of flowers are, where the pollen and nectar is. Basically, she's communicating where to go.
Doesn't some of the dance show direction and distance?
Direction and distance, according to the sun, I believe, where they're at. So let's just really quickly, we'll go through the year in the life of a honeybee. First of all, we'll start in spring, and spring really is swarm season. Spring, if your hive is healthy and it's coming out of winter really healthy, that hive is going to want to split. That's how they reproduce. So it's really what it all is about, right? Procreation. So the beekeepers like me do not want my bees to do that, because when they do that, I lose half of my hive, right? So what's happening is that queen will lay, the hive will signal her to lay an egg in a specialty cell. She'll lay an egg in there, and there's not just one, there's going to be like 12 or more. And they feed that royal jelly, and it becomes a queen cell, and queens will develop in there. When that happens, then once that is capped, and that takes about 12 or so days, when it's capped, the old queen, along with some of the worker bees, will gather and they fly off, and then fly off into a tree. And that tree is just a holding pattern. It's just where they stay there, and they stay there in a cluster of bees. So half the hive is off in a cluster in a tree somewhere, or a mailbox, or wherever. And there's now that cluster of bees has scout bees on the surface, and those scout bees are out looking for a home. They come in, they talk about where they want to go, and eventually that whole thing goes and flies off to a new home. The parent hive, the hive that was there, now has queen cells that need to hatch. They'll hatch, and then the first queen that hatches, she goes and she kills the other. And then she waits for a few days, gets a little bit more mature, and she flies off to this drone congregation field, mates, and then comes back. Hopefully she comes back. We beekeepers always consider our hives at risk because she could not come back, she could get eaten by a bird, or you never know what could happen to her. So we don't want this whole thing to happen. So we try to manipulate the hive so it doesn't happen. Because normally a hive out in the wild will not survive, and especially in today's day and age with mites and all the pesticides out there, a feral hive, a hive that's just out in a tree somewhere, will not survive. They're also bad for your neighbors, and they're bad for your pocketbook because they cost money. All right, so that's just a picture of the special cell that I was talking about. There's an egg right down in the middle. Whenever I see those cells, I peek down in there to see if there's an egg, and sure enough, there was an egg. And so that egg is, I know that this hive is aiming to swarm, to split, to divide, to birth a new hive, basically. That's what they look like when they're fully formed. These are lovely queen cells. There's beautiful, large queens in there. So I had to manage that by moving it to another box and with some other bees so that they can kind of hatch out. All right. In the summer, the hive is working at full force. We have 60,000 plus bees in there. Beekeepers are managing their hive. They're keeping a close look on it to make sure it's really healthy. We're adding boxes on top, honey boxes on top, because we got to make sure that we create enough room for those bees, because the bees are quickly expanding. She's laying a lot of eggs and they're hatching. And so we need to make sure that there's plenty of room. If there's not enough room, that hive will signal for her to lay some eggs and a queen cell, and pretty soon it'll split, and we don't want that to happen. In the fall, resources are starting to get low, and so when I say fall, I mean like August and mid-August. We start seeing less and less flowers out there, and at this point, as the resources go down, everything kind of tends to slow down in the hive, and the drones basically are kicked out. You can actually watch this happen as the worker bees kick them out of the hive because they don't contribute. They'll just feed, and there's not going to be enough food to feed food to get them through the winter. So this is the point that we beekeepers need to be sure that our hives are very healthy. We need to have been managing our mite level throughout that summer so that these bees, because these are the bees that are going to need, that are hatching out in August, that are going to need to live for 6 months or more. These are the ones that are going to get us through the winter. All right, so these are the ones that are living inside the hive. And these are the ones that have, their bodies tend to change at this point. Well, they start to, their fat bodies, basically, it's called their fat bodies, they get more full of fat. So that's what helps them get them through the winter. So winter bees are very important. And then in winter, basically the queen stops laying, and they are clustered down, as I mentioned, clustered down at the bottom of the hive. Inside of the temperature, they're going to try to keep that warm. They're going to be moving in and out, trying to keep the inside of that warm. And then in spring, in July, in February, when you see a nice day, the bees will start to come out if it's really warm. They'll come out and they'll fly because they don't actually, they come out and go to the bathroom basically because otherwise they're just inside the hive. They don't do that inside the hive. So when we see that, we know our bees are starting to, we're really hopeful our bees are making it through the winter. In the spring, if they come through the winter, they're usually pretty healthy, and then you can, manage them into spring and try to, the whole process basically starts all over again. That was a lot about honeybees. And I have some common questions. We'll go through these, and I'll ask, and you guys can ask me some questions as well. And then I wanted to get into our native bees a little bit also. But I've been talking about bees long enough, and there's some common questions that always tend to come up. And one of those is isn't honey just basically bee vomit? It is not. They have a honey stomach. Basically, they have a second stomach where they suck the nectar in, and it goes into their honey stomach, and into their honey stomach. And that's it right there. You get asked that a lot. What is honey actually? Honey is, I could ask that too. Honey is nectar from flowers, and it's 70 to 80% of that is water. And the bees actually have to dry that down to only 18% water, and then they place a wax cap over it, and that's what you see for wax, what wax honey is. They dry it down by circulating air through there and flapping their wings, and it actually gets dried down. How much honey? Only about 1/12 of a teaspoon. Remember that honeybees only collect nectar the last 2 weeks of their life. How many flowers? They can visit 50 to 100 flowers in one flight, and they usually can take between 12 or more flights in one day. They're busy. How many flowers to make a pound of honey? 2 million. It's a lot of honey. I mean, it's a lot of flowers. How much honey can an average hive make? And that is dependent on the hive. I've had hives that are super healthy and just, I mean, I've gotten so much honey off of there. I've gotten hives that are super healthy and for whatever reason they're just not bringing it in. So it really depends on the hive. Honeybees on the average, they can produce 3 times as much honey as they need, which means beekeepers can take off the rest. But as a beekeeper through the winter, I need to leave at least 100 pounds of honey on top for them to survive through the winter. That's it about the honeybee. Just know that anything that happens to the honeybee, honeybees are studied. Everybody's focused on the honeybee, but what's happening to the honeybee is also happening to all of our native pollinators as well.
You mentioned royal jelly. What is it?
Royal jelly is, it's a mix of really pollen and nectar, and it's extremely nutritious. So it's them mixing up their bee food. With a lot more pollen, a lot more protein in it than what the worker bees get. The bees when they collect pollen, they don't just collect nectar, they collect pollen too. So on the top, bees will place the nectar on their heads, up above them. The pollen is spread around the nest, so the nest is actually rounded, and around that top would be a row of pollen. And pollen is all different colors, so you could go in there and see light and dark, because they're getting it from different plants, right? So this is all pollen. What they do is they mix nectar and pollen together to make what's kind of called a bee bread. And that kind of ferments together in there. And the food that they're feeding the queen, the royal jelly, is a really highly concentrated bee bread, basically. It's really highly nutritious.
You already answered my question regarding the food management over winter. Generally speaking, how would you manage the mites as well?
There are treatments, so I bet you, I mean, there could be 17 or more universities and other organizations that are studying the varroa mite and what's happening to honeybees. There are treatments, there are organic treatments, and there's chemical treatments that beekeepers how they treat their hives. So if my honeybees, it depends, if my honeybees have too high of a level of mites, I will treat them with one of these treatments. And it depends on the kind of beekeeper that I am, which kind of treatment I want to use. And it also depends on the time of year and the temperature outside, which kind I can use. It also depends on whether or not I've got honey on or not, because some of them, the chemical ones, you can't treat your bees when you've got honey supers on. So beekeepers need to treat them basically to knock the mite level down. You'll never have no mites, but you need to have a very, very low amount of mites in the hive.
Now, well, how can you tell how many mites you have? Is the indicator the amount of dead bees?
No, the indicator is by doing what's called, there's 2 ways to do it. One is called an alcohol test, so you scoop up I would take a frame of like young bees, nurse bees basically, and shake them off, scoop up a half a cup of bees and put it into a a jar of alcohol. Basically, it kills them, and the mites fall off. And then there's a screen you put over the top, and you shake them out, and the mites come out, and I count them. And how many mites I have there tells me, I can now divide that in with how many mites I should have, and I know approximately the count. The approximate percentage of mites that I have in my hive. That's one way, it kills them. There's another way, you can use powdered sugar and do exactly the same thing. You shake the bees, you scoop up a half a cup of bees, put them in a container with powdered sugar, you shake that up, and then you shake them out through this screen, and the only thing that comes out are the mites, and you can count your mites that way.
So it's literal
So
counting.
you're literally
It's,
counting mites, and you count those mites, it gives you a certain percentage of mites that you have inside the hive. That way, that's how you know what your mite level is. And beekeepers need to do that constantly to make sure their mite level is really low.
So is it a spray, this control for the bites?
No, it's not a spray. There's all different kinds of ways to do it. There's like forms you can stick in the hive that needs to stay in there for, you know, weeks, or sometimes like I think it was like 8 weeks. So there's all different forms of different types of organic and unorganic ways to treat mites. Anyone else?
How big are the bites?
The mites are very tiny, and it is like killing a bug on a bug.
Oh,
So
geez.
if I had a mite on me, it would probably be about this big. So you can see them on there, but if I'm seeing a mite, if I'm seeing them, there's definitely a problem in the hive.
Okay.
Yeah, normally you don't really see them. You have to test them to see how many you have because they fall off. But if I'm seeing them by basically opening up my hive and looking, I've got too many in there already. Yep.
About the size of a chigger? What's the size of the mite? Size-wise, what do you,
They're just,
like a chigger size?
yeah, I would say,
Okay,
yeah.
is that clear?
They can kind of slide up underneath the bees. Has kind of plates on its body. It's an exoskeleton. They can kind of slide up underneath there, so they're, you know, tiny enough to be able to do that. Yeah.
My name's John Snyder, I live in Green Lake, and I'm a newbie. Had a hive, it's a lot of fun, you can't believe this. You get 20 beekeepers together, get 40 opinions. And we do have local hives here, and the Green Bay chapter is well known.
Good.
We've done a tremendous
Oh,
job today.
fantastic. I like to hear
We
that.
do have a local chapter. We meet right across the street in the library every third Saturday. And our queen bee is sitting in the front row by your right hand. Gerard, right there. So if you want to know anything about our local club meeting, this is the most fantastic thing I've ever done. It's amazing to me, 1,200 people in Green Lake, sometimes we can't get along. You got 60,000 bees in a hive, and they all get along. I don't know. It's tremendously fascinating. And,
I would say being a beekeeper when I first started beekeeping, it was the most fascinating thing, the most interesting thing I've ever done. I loved it. I'm not a beekeeper anymore, because I'm more on native bees right now, but it got me where I am today. I loved it. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. They're really amazing creatures.
I would like to get some of those bees that don't sting.
Yeah. All right, so, yes, one more.
Is there, your knowledge, is there woods and woodland that there is native bees that are living in a hollow tree somewhere?
So,
Is there much of that
back in
around
the
here?
day, probably, but today, we consider those feral bees, and they will not survive very long, because they're gonna have mite issues, they won't make it through the winter. We still have pesticides out there, they're not healthy. They're not healthy, they won't make it. 9 chances out of 10. I've never seen, have you seen? Have you?
Well, Tom Seeley did a lot of work with the feral bees. They do survive because of the propolis envelope that they build inside the cavity. So they could have very high levels of mites and they still survive. But a lot of them died when the mite first got here and wiped them, most of them out. Those that had resistance to them are out there, but the numbers are way lower than they used to.
Yeah.
But this propolis, and beekeepers are now trying to develop hives with rough interiors so that the bees will build a propolis envelope inside to mimic what they're doing in
Yeah.
nature.
Propolis is the tree sap that I mentioned earlier. So the propolis is said to be antibacterial and antibiotic. So right, all of the good stuff. I don't know. Beekeepers don't want them just do that, but I've not seen them really survive, and it may be, but.
We moved into a house about 23 years ago. We had a tree in each side of our house that had a feral beehive in it. And it was there a good 10 plus 15 years maybe, till the tree split apart.
So, and probably what happened there is bees move in and out.
Yeah.
So the queen's only gonna live, she only lives about two to 3 years. I mean, beekeepers don't necessarily wanna keep them more than 2.
Yeah, we saw them split off once or twice, like that. But when the tree split,
Swarm.
yeah, we still have the honey from when the tree split apart. When we had to cut it up, we took the honey out first.
Okay, so let's talk about native bees, shall we? Okay, this is one of the young ladies I mentored. That's beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Okay. So native bees, like I mentioned, we've got over 4,000 species of native bees here, but most people only really know of the non-native honeybee. And the fact is that our native bees and our native pollinators, all of them are declining at an alarming rate. To me, honeybees are the red flag. They're the canary in the coal mine. They're telling us that there's a problem out there. And we need to really pay attention to what's happening to our native pollinators right now. Native plants and native bees, like I mentioned earlier, they evolve together, so they need each other to sort of survive. I love this. This is from the Minnesota Bee Lab. This will show you basically how many other native bees you have in your yards right now. You will have when it's warmer. Bumblebees, so you see this here, it says bumblebees. Bumblebees are native, but this is just a nice visual to see bumblebees and honeybees. It's just this one little sliver. All the rest of this are all the other native bees that are out there. So I put them in 3 categories. First of all, the social bee is basically, it's the non-native honeybee. And these are social, and they're not endangered. Because they're not endangered because they have beekeepers who are managing like us. Beekeepers are managing these hives. They'll have, I think this year was a really rough year, but everybody's watching what's happening to the bee, the honeybee. And me as a beekeeper, if I have 4 hives and I lose half of them, so I lose 2 hives, lose 50% of my hives, I can, in the spring when the other 2 come up, I will split those and I'll have 4 again. And if I have a really super healthy hive, I can split it again and I'll have 5. And so that's what beekeepers are doing to take care of their honeybees. We're not going to be losing our honeybees because they're too valuable for our agricultural stability. And we don't want to lose honeybees. We have semi-social bees, which is the bumblebee. So the bumblebee starts out as just one bee, one queen bee, and then she hatches eggs and she creates herself a small nest. And I'll get into this in just a few minutes. So that, and she can have 50 to 500 different bees. And then we have the 90% of all the other bees out there are solitary bees. Meaning there's one single bee that does everything that 60,000 bees hive did. So you have one queen, she's out finding a hive, she's provisioning that hive, she's laying the eggs, she's defending the nest when the nest has to be defended, and all usually within a very short window of time, sometimes only 4 to 6 weeks. We can sometimes see them, well, they might just kind of congregate in one area, but for the most part, it's just one nest. It's a nest of bees, and her nest, yes. So let's talk about who you're going to see in your garden. And I'm going to start with the bumblebee because I love bumblebees. And we have 20 different species of bumblebees here in Wisconsin. One of those is already on the endangered list. Who knows what that is? Rusty patch bumblebee. You've heard about the rusty patch bumblebee? Rusty patch bumblebee is on the endangered list. And in the 1990s, this bee used to be everywhere. It was common. And soon, I think it was it was just 27 years later, it was placed on the endangered species list. 27. How many have kids that are 27 years old? I mean, it's not that long ago. And so we need to really pay attention to what's happening to our bumblebees. There's another 10 bees that are being watched really closely. A couple of these bees that are on here, that are here in Wisconsin, we haven't seen for 10 plus years. So bumblebees are in trouble. Bumblebees are, like I said, semi-social. They're cavity nesters. So bumblebees are going to take up a nest, like their favorite is like a rodent hole, a chipmunk or a mouse. They're not digging their own hole. They're going to find a hole somewhere. I've seen them in birdhouses and sheds and rock walls and wood piles and such. They're going to find, she's going to go out and she's going to find a hole that she can, big enough for her, about basketball size for her to create a nest in. She's considered a generalist, meaning she'll go to any plant or flower that she can in order to gather honey and nectar. She's known for buzz pollination. How many know what buzz pollination is? Buzz pollination is, so earlier I mentioned that bees and plants evolve together. Some plants evolve, they don't want any bee to come and take their pollen. They want the bee that's going to come and take their pollen and take it to their like plant, right? So some plants, they hold their pollen really tightly. This is a tomato plant here, and you can see it's got a cone, the anthers are inside the cone. Bumblebees can get in there and pollinate that. Honeybees cannot. Because what that bumblebee will do is she'll grasp a hold of that cone with her mandibles, and she'll kind of unhook her wings and she'll vibrate her flight muscles, and that pollen will come flying all over her. So that's what buzz pollination is. It's really wonderful, and it's what our bumblebees can do, and some of the other native bees can do that as well. So she's known for buzz pollination. The bumblebees are very hardy. They'll fly pretty much whether it's rain or shine, or honeybees, they don't like to do that. They're kind of like, it's cold, I'm not going out. Yeah. Bumblebees, I'm like, I'm out! All right, bumblebees' life cycle, I thought I'd go through this really quickly. We start out with one mated queen, and she hibernates underground. She'll dig like a few inches underneath the ground or in your leaf pile, somewhere in there. She'll dig it under there and hibernate through the winter. She comes out in the spring. Right about now, you're going to start seeing queen bumblebees come out, and I encourage you to watch for them because it's really fun. You'll see this fat bee, and she will be low to the ground, and she'll be zigzagging across the ground looking for a nest. You'll start to see them right about now because they're coming out of hibernation. It's also one reason why it's really important that we have early blooming plants, because she's also coming out hungry and going to need to feed. So she finds herself a nest. She will create a little honey pot, a little wax honey pot, and put some nectar and some pollen in there. And then she'll lay some eggs. And she'll literally sit on those eggs similar to like a bird, and go off and feed when she has to and come back until that hatches. Then later, when those start to hatch, those worker bees, then her daughters will take over the duty of provisioning the hive. They'll go out and start collecting the nectar and the pollen. a little later in the season, depending on the species of bumblebee, so sometime in August, she'll start to lay virgin queens and drones, males. And those virgin males or virgin queens they're gonna go out and they're gonna mate with males from other areas, and those males will go off, and they'll do the same. And at this point, that whole hive will basically collapse. That old queen, she basically flies off and she dies. Those young virgin queens, they are now newly mated queens, will now go find a spot and hibernate, and the whole process starts all over again. So the hive basically collapses. And one of the things I do for the Brown County beekeepers is I take in a lot of calls for people who don't know what to do because now they have bumblebees in their bumblebee nests. And I usually don't start getting them until like fall. And that's when I tell them, well, you've had that bumblebee nest there all summer long, but they didn't know it. And I let them know that if you just wait there, just be patient enough, that whole hive is going to collapse and die, and then just close up the hole wherever they're at. Sometimes they're like under a stoop or something. If you close up the hole and not let them in so someone else doesn't move in, but usually they've taken up a rodent hole. And they'll be fine. And 99% of the time, most people are like fine with that. You know, they'll just let them go. They just don't know that they died. They think they're like a honeybee and they're going to have this big hive underneath their property. So that's the bumblebee. That's the bumblebee. Semi-social bumblebee. The other 90%, let's talk about those real quick. The other 90% are solitary bees. 2/3 of those solitary bees live in the ground. They have one hole. They have a hole that they dig into the ground, and that's where they live. They'll find woodland edges, gardens, sandy areas, meadows, and they dig a hole down in the ground. Like I mentioned, some of them are kind of do it in a congregate, so you might think there's more than one bee there, but it's really just one hole with a nest. And they're very, very mild-mannered because they don't have a big nest of bees to protect. This is one queen that needs to protect her eggs, and she doesn't really care about us. She's just trying to provision her hive, you know? So that's that. The other ones, those are the ground nesting ones. The 1/3 are those bees that are living in tiny holes in trees, twigs, or your pithy stems. Do you know that you've got bees living in your pithy stems? They're so important, and we just cut them off and throw them away. But there could be bees that are nesting in there. So, and old name trees are great to have. I've got a tree that my husband's like, cut the tree down, and I'm like, it's got so many tiny holes in it from beetles. I know that there's native bees that are nesting in there. I love that tree. I don't care if it's dead. I want that tree. I want it. So solitary bees tend to specialize on flowers. Similar to the monarch butterfly that specializes on the milkweed, it's not the only pollinator that does that. Many, many butterflies and other pollinators specialize on native plants. Bees are the same. These native bees are specialized. They only want to go to certain families of native plants. And so that's why it's really important for us to have these native plants in our yards. They're exceptionally good pollinators, better than honeybee. They are. They're very docile, like I mentioned. They don't have a big colony to defend. And they can lay females 50 to 25 eggs total. And some only live for 2 to 6 weeks, so they're a very short period of time. So let's talk about who they are, who you're going to see. So when I'm talking about a mining bee, for example, I'm talking about the family of mining bees. So there's several species of mining bees, right? Mining bees, it's a large family, and some of them are very big and some of them are very tiny. They're usually dark with pale hairs, but it can vary. They can be mistaken for the bumblebee. These are the bees that can congregate in specific areas. You'll see a hole in the ground similar like this. You know you've got a native pollinator there. And so they also tend to specialize. They're out from April to June, and then another species is out from August to September, and those are the bees that are going to be specializing on your asters and goldenrods. So really want to be sure you've got lots of golden-rounded asters in your yard. The sweat bee, I know you've all seen sweat bees. Tiny little green metallic bees, so small. These are also brown nesters, and they can also buzz pollinate, believe it or not. And if they can't buzz pollinate, I've seen them chew a hole in the side of the anther and get in that way. So they're determined little tiny things. They are, like I said, they're ground nesters, and some of them will build like little turrets in the ground. So if you don't put anything on your earth and it's just bare, don't put any, any kind of, I don't know, preen, I think, is that stuff that you put on the ground to keep pre-emerging stuff. Don't put any of that on because it just poisons everybody. If you leave it bare, they will come and you'll see these little turrets all over the place. It's really wonderful. And you'll see these tiny bees that are flying in and out. Okay, so that's the sweat bee. They're sweat bees because they're attracted to moisture, just sweat. All right, they're out from May through September. Cellophane bees are some of the earliest bees that come out. They're out sometimes in March and April, so they could be out now. So another reason we want to have early blooming plants. They're also ground nesters. They'll dig deep into the ground and they line their nest with from their glands a substance that's similar to cellophane. And it's because they're only out for a short period of time, and they need to have their larvae and her young to make it through the winter 10 months underground. So she lines it with a cellophane type material, so it's called a cellophane bee. And they overwinter as adults, so it's pretty cool. Longhorn bees. I love these bees. These bees are really fun. They actually have very long antennas. Males have much longer antennas than females. I see most of my longhorn bees on my brown and black-eyed Susans, so they tend to be there. The males will tend to hang out on the flower. They can kind of hang out together by grabbing the flower or the leaf with their mandibles. And if you go there early in the morning, you can see them hanging out there waiting for their female to come by. The longhorn bee. I mean, once you see these in your yard, you get kind of excited. Like, I saw a longhorn bee. That's the male. If I had a better camera, you'd see how pretty his eyes are, really bright green. But look at those. I mean, come on. You've got some antenna there, buddy. Longhorn bee. All right, small carpenter bees. You've seen these too, I'm sure. You probably think it's a gnat. They're so tiny. These are the bees that are going to be nesting in your pithy stems and stalks. It's really important. Well, we don't want to cut our stalks off right now and just throw them away or burn them, because we could have bees that are nesting in them. If you have to clean your garden, cut it, leave at least, a foot or so. You can remove the rest. The plant will grow up and around it, and the bees will nest in there. This year's stalks and stems are next year's bees. So I would just leave them if you can. They're out also early April through October. Mason bees. These are the bees that a lot of people buy the houses for and put them up in their yard. They've got the tubes that are in there. Mason bees can be encouraged through nest boxes. They're nesting in holes in trees. These are the bees that are nesting in the holes, probably in my old nag tree that's up that the beetles have made holes in. Are mason bees. They're extremely good in orchards because they carry the pollen on their belly. Look, a lot of bees carry it on their legs or their, around their bodies, but they carry it on their belly, which means they're going from flower to flower. The pollen's right there. They're automatically pollinating them. Extremely good pollinators, and really important for our apple orchards. And they're out from May and June. Leaf cutter bees. These are another really fun bee that I like to watch. She also carries her pollen, you can see, on her belly. And when she flies, she kind of flies like this. Her butt's a little bit up in the air. She can also be, she also is she nests in a hole like in a tree, or can be encouraged by one of these nest boxes. Just a very important pollinator. So if you go out into your yard and you see the leaves of your plant, like you got a rose bush or whatever, and I've got to see all these perfectly little ovals that are cut out of there, you can do a little happy dance right there. Because you've got somewhere a leaf cutter bee. And that leaf cutter bee, what she's doing, she's cutting a perfectly round oval with her mandibles, and then she's picking that up and she's tucking it in her arms, and she's flying off into a hole and she's tucking it into a hole. She's dropping some pollen in there and a little bit of nectar. She lays an egg and she closes it up with another piece of leaf. And she does that throughout the whole tube until she's got all of her eggs laid. And so that's what she's doing with a leaf cutter. That's what a leaf cutter bee does. Really beautiful bees to have in your yard. Let's see, where am I here? Squash bee, this is the last one I'll talk about. How many of you grow pumpkin, squash, zucchini, so on and so forth? If you're doing that, you've undoubtedly got squash bees. Squash bees are great pollinators. The males tend to like to hang out inside the flowers. So if you go out there and you peek inside of a flower early in the morning, you can probably see some big males sleeping in there. They come out from June through August. They can also be mistaken for honeybees. And they're ground nesters. So normally if you have your squash in one particular area, they'll tend to want to create a nest somewhere around there. So kind of watch to see if you can find it on the ground, and don't put anything on the ground, like anything that'll poison them. So, okay, so that's the squash bee. All right, so let's talk about what's threats and what we can do, okay? So when I mentioned the honeybee, the threats are the varroa mites and diseases, its nutrition, and its pesticides. For our native bees, it's habitat. We as humans are taking up all the habitat, and we're making it so it's impossible for them to nest. We're laying down, lawn fabrics, and we're covering it up with grass and pesticides, and you name it, we're putting it out there. Really important for us to give these bees habitat to live in, or we're going to lose them because they're already declining at an amazing rate. Leave your leaves in the fall. Leaves are extremely great for the earth. I mean, they're nutritious, right? When you remove your leaves, you're also removing a lot of animals that could use that for nesting in. Not just native bees, but fireflies use that. So when you remove all that, you're removing all that. You could rake them maybe if you need to kind of move them off of your yard a little bit into another area, but otherwise leave them there. Leave the leaves, stems, sticks, stalks, rodent holes, don't close those up. Stumps, brush piles, and bare ground. If you have bare ground and you don't put anything on it, I tell you, you will have somebody nesting in it. So habitat is about one of the #1 reasons that we're having trouble with them. And it's also nutrition. We don't plant enough native plants. You go into your local nursery right now, big box stores, ask them where their native plants are. You won't find any. You really won't. You won't. And this is a problem because a lot of non-native and invasive plants are all over our natural areas. That does nothing for our native pollinators. Not just bees, but butterflies and our critters and other animals that need to have our native plants here. That evolve, we all evolve together. So we need native plants. Please plant them that bloom from April to October because we've got bees that are coming out and going to need to nectar on them. Try to minimize your turfgrass. Turfgrass does nothing. Purchase plants and seeds from reputable garden centers. Many of them in the big box stores have already been pre-treated. If you're buying the seeds and they're blue, you know there's something wrong there, right? You can also look on the tags. Some plants will have tags that'll tell you whether they were pre-treated. If they're pre-treated with something, it's harmful for our pollinators. It's systemic. It's coming out in the nectar and the pollen. Remove non-natives if you can. And put in native plants. I'm not saying you got to have 100% all native, but if you have a patch of native plants, it really matters. And then consider keystone. How many people know what keystone plants are? Keystone plants are the plants that give you the biggest bang for the buck. And Doug Tallamy, anybody read this book by Doug Tallamy? I highly recommend go get this book. It'll change your world. He actually coined the phrase, I believe, keystone plants. And they're the plants that give you the biggest bang for the buck. They're the ones that are going to help not only our native bees, but also butterflies and caterpillars. And so if you can plant keystone plants, they give you the biggest bang for the buck. I'm going to give you some resources too that can help. All right, and pesticides. We use way too much pesticides. You don't need pesticides. If you've got native plants, you're bringing in the help that you need with bugs. And if bugs aren't eating your plants, then in this ecosystem, you're doing something wrong. They should be eating your plants. That's what they're there for. So we've got glyphosates, neonics, and pyrethroids. All of these are terrible out there in our environment. They're systemic, which means they go into the plant, and our pollinators are then feeding on them, and it's harming them. Who knows what the pyrethroids are for? Where does that? Mosquito sprays, right? Mosquitoes. These guys that are doing the coming and spraying, they're going to say, "Oh, that's just from chrysanthemums." It's a chemical, right? But it's a concentrated chemical, man-made chemical, and they add other chemicals in there to make it even stronger. They are deadly, and it's not just killing the mosquito. They're spraying it out there, and it stays on the leaves and the plants for like 3 or 4 days, and then they tell you to come in and spray it again. And it's killing everything. It's absolutely harming everything, including our frogs and snakes and turtles and everything else out there. You don't need to spray it. If you want to get rid of mosquitoes, actually the #1 way to get rid of mosquitoes is make sure you don't have water, standing water. Mosquitoes can lay eggs and as much as a bottle cap of water. A mosquito will lay an egg in there. So remove all the standing water you can. If you've got a bird bath, make sure you flush it, like every so often, every 3 or 4 days. But you want to remove hundreds of mosquitoes. And by the way, mosquitoes actually are important. They're part of the food cycle, So it's not like mosquitoes they're just a pest. We don't like them, but they are part of our environment. But if you want to get rid of them, really, get a bucket. Fill it with some water, put some hay in there, let it ferment for a few days in the sun. I'm telling you, that female, she's going to come there and think it's heaven. She's going to love it, and she's going to lay her eggs in there. Put a square or circle of mosquito dung in there, and that will kill the eggs. And then you're killing the target, and you're killing it in the egg phase and not the adult phase, which really doesn't do much of anything. If you do this, and not spray, don't get your neighbors, talk to your neighbors, tell them not to spray, because this matters in your yard as well, especially if you're trying to get native plants and native pollinators into your yard. If they're spraying, it also impacts what you're doing in your yard. So that's my soapbox about that.
Where do you find those?
Oh, Fleet Farm.
Okay.
Oh yeah, anywhere. You get them anywhere. Yep. Okay, so resources. I'm going to share some resources with you. You want to identify bees? I've got some great books that do that. But you can also go online, and Wisconsin has some really good web pages. The Bee Identify Guide. It's kind of fun because it makes it really simple. It divides them into big bees, little bees, green bees, so on and so forth. And it's just something nice to look at to get yourself familiar with native bees. Wisconsin DNR also has a really good page to help you identify native bees. Wisconsin Bee Guide, the one that's the second to the bottom, that one's really good too. It's just a 2-pager, and you can print that out and you can take a look at, see what native bees are out there. And then the bottom, this Wisconsin Bee Identification Guide, this is like a 15-page document, but it's really fun to read if you like that kind of thing, which I do. It'll give you so much information. And you can get this all online, it's there. Bumblebees. Wisconsin has a bumblebee site. You can learn how to identify the 20 different species of bumblebees. It really, for me, what I did, I started with bumblebees because I wanted to learn the different types of bumblebees, and that brought me into all the other bees that were out there. They're really, really great to learn, and it's not that hard to learn bumblebees. So this is a really good site, the Bumblebees of Wisconsin. And if you really want to get involved, you can Google Bumblebee Brigade. This is really a great site. It is. They will teach you how to identify bees. There's some like YouTube seminars in there, YouTube videos. Teach you how to identify the bees. It also teaches you how to take pictures of these bees. It'll show you where you can send these pictures off to the University of Wisconsin so they can keep track of them. Citizen science right here. So it's really a good thing to do, and it's really much easier than what it sounds. And it's actually really fun to, oh my gosh, this bumblebee is it's a brown striped bumblebee or whatever. It is. I've got this bumblebee in my yard and now I can identify it. And then that also helps you learn, if you want different types of bees in your yard, you can pick up a book and you can plant the plants that will bring them in. And when you see them in there, it's really fun. All right, other resources. Native plants can seem like daunting. I know it really can. When you start thinking about, I want to put specific native plants in my yard, you can Google these sites. So the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, that you put in your zip code and it'll come up with all kinds of different native plants that you can plant. It'll help you source them, is basically what I'm saying. Doug Talmay, also his site is Homegrown National Park. It's an amazing site. So much information out there on native plants. That will help you. Do you know Prairie Nursery? Anybody? It's just west of here. And you can go there and shop all you want. It's like it's really fun, really great. Neil Divo, I think he created it. It's a great place to go, and even the website is really good. Go to the website. It'll show you. It gives you so much information that'll help you pair the plant to what you're looking for. I mean, I think of the Lady Bird Johnson, you could even say I want it to be a red flower that blossoms in July and it needs to be 3 feet tall. So Native Plant Finder is another one, and Xerxes Society is also really good. All kinds of information from Xerxes. And I encourage, I don't know if there's a local wild ones around here, I'm pretty sure there is. You should join if you're interested in native plants. If you want to learn about native plants, that's where I learned most of, just by talking to people from wild ones. Really, really a good group of people. They're like birders, you know. We like the earth. So okay, so that's native plants. And I have all kinds of books. My favorite is Heather Holm, and you can actually Google her. She's got so much information out there about bees. You'll learn a lot. And I mean, this one is my favorite. I got this one all dog-eared. She talks about the bees, and she also talks about the plants that the specific bees specialize on. So you can buy that plant, make sure that it fits, your property, and by looking at, some of the other resources, and even here she'll tell you, and then put it in the ground and see what happens. It's really fun. It's just tons of information, and she explains it really well. She also tells you when the bee's out, the month that the bee's usually out. And as well, this book as well too, this is the one by Lorraine Johnson. This is it's a little bit simpler than Heather Holmes, but the same thing. She's got all this, lots of information on native plants, and the bees are the pollinators that specialize them, that specialize on them, the ones that we're going to want to put in our yard to bring them in and to help our pollinators.
Julie, you love that Doug Talmay book. I love that too. But I was pleased he's come out with one for children.
He did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, even if you're an adult, it's an easier read. read, but if you have younger people around, it's
Yeah.
stimulating
He
in a book.
he came out, actually, I have, I thought I listed his books. Yeah, I don't have the children's book up here, but I should put it there. He came out with a children's
it's really
book as
great.
well. And I haven't seen it, but I heard really good things about it.
I've read it, it's good.
Oh, good to know, yeah.
Are these unique to Wisconsin?
Pardon me?
Are the books,
Doug Talame he's all about nature, basically explaining more about nature. He's not just Wisconsin, but Heather Holmes is from Minnesota, and so she's Midwestern. So this is all around, and so is this one. So this is Midwest, I believe, as well, right? I mean, yeah, northern Wisconsin gardener, and this is all Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan type stuff. Yeah, Eastern, yeah, Midwest. Our Native Bees by Paige Embry is just kind of a fun book to read about bees. She just tells you, introduces you a little bit about bees. It's more entertaining, I think. So that's it. What is questions? I know, it was a lot, wasn't it?
It was great, it was great.
All right, very good.
Any questions for anybody? Oh, Eric has one right here.
Well, speaking of bird club, you should point out that another way to control mosquitoes is to encourage swallow nesting and bats.
Yes, good, yeah.
Thank you, Julie, that was fantastic.
I will tell you, perhaps you noticed that we have a video camera operating in the back, and this presentation is going to be available on YouTube. Once we get it done, we'll let people know, we'll give you a link for that, so you can watch it again. But it's nice because it provided an awful lot of information that's hard to take in very quickly.
I think that, I mean, perhaps we don't have that many questions because you really actually gave us a ton of wonderful, like, I kind of feel like, you know, like we guys get excited about the warblers and identifying them, like, now we should go out on a bee.
I actually really encourage people to go out and just, here's what you do, you go out to your garden and just watch. I mean, you will be surprised. I think we tend to move fast, but if you just stand there and watch, you'll see movement. And look for the tiny ones, not just the big bumblebees, because there's a lot of tiny ones that are out there that are flying from flower to flower. That's where you're going to see the sweat bee or the tiny little carpenter bee. So if you just sit there and watch, you'll see movement. And if you have native plants, I mean, you'll be surprised at how many more bees and butterflies and birds that you're going to have in your yard. My husband and I planted expanded a native garden that we have in Wapaka, and I bet you I counted at least 7 different butterflies that I've never seen before in there, and as well as different types of bees. It brings them in.
My house, we have a pretty big garden, and my husband has done us when he sees holes on our plants and whatever.
leaf cutter?
Oh yeah, leaf cutter bees. Yeah, doesn't harm the plant.
He thinks it's like bugs eating.
Yes, I know it's not.
They're
Right, and then let's spray that plant. But you know, yeah, you don't want to kill it because don't spray anything. But you know, we need to be part of the ecosystem, not separate from it. And our plants are part of the ecosystem, and so we can't kill everything that's on it. What's the point?
Talk to my husband.
Is it known how bees recognize flowers? Do they have a sense of
smell, or they actually visually know what they're
They,
from?
it's an interesting question. So I know there's been studies out there trying to figure out how a bee will hatch from the ground. So I'm talking a native bee will hatch from the ground, and they specialize on certain flowers. How does that bee know to go to that flower? The study that actually I just listened to it from the Xerxes Society. There was a study that was done that showed they tried to feed a bee, a native bee, a bumblebee. No, it wasn't a bumblebee. It was a certain type of native bee. I can't remember what it was.
Okay, thank you.
And they tried to feed it a different food than what it specializes on. The female, she was dumb. She wasn't gonna. She wouldn't lay her eggs. She wouldn't take it at all. She wasn't gonna do it. The male bee that they fed this, the type of pollen that wasn't from the type of flower that specialized on it, ate it. And but when it went out and flew straight to straight to the flower that it specialized on. It's a mystery how they know where to go, but they do. Some people believe that, so a native bee specializes on a specific flower, for example, that queen has fed the larva pollen from that flower, so it knows to go, it waits for that smell and it goes to that. So that could be one thing, that the queen feeds that, and so it's ingrained that way.
So I put water on the bees. Can you just say a little bit about just water? And how many bees need to have a water source? And
I mean, if it's really dry, you can put water out there for them for sure. And when you do that though, don't just put water in a bucket because they'll drown. So put rocks and something for them to crawl in and around on. So it's a good thing, just make sure you're cleaning it out often or you'll have mosquito heaven. But yeah, if you do that or leave something for them to float on, it's a good thing to do always, especially when it's hot and there's not a lot of rain. For sure.
They really seem to go to.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, a water source.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, we should all do that, right? You know, give them some water, especially when it's so hot. There's not a lot of water around.
We believe several resident opossums that dug holes all over our lawn. It sounds like would I be encouraging bees by not filling in the holes in the spring? The holes are very ingenious, by the way. They're cut in a semicircle with one side attached, so you can just take the grass and drop it right back in, and it fits perfectly. I assume it's the opossum that's doing that.
Well, opossums are really good, you know. They eat ticks. It's good to have possums in your yard. Yeah. If the hole is, big enough.
Small.
Yeah, but underneath there's a hole for.
Yes.
I can't guarantee 100%, but I would say, maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's really hard. People have tried to create like a bumblebee boxes and hoping that a bumblebee will come in and nest in there, and it's really, really hard. They just don't seem to want to do that. I've done it myself, and I can't get them home. But I don't know. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Tom Schultz. I'm the president of the Green Lake Bird Nature Club. And we meet monthly here. I guess I will start with this. We are a rather unique club from the standpoint that we don't have a membership. We don't have a listing of all of our members. We don't ask people to pay dues. We just invite people to come and join us whenever they can. We try to announce our presentations in the newspapers in Green Lake and Ripon. And we also have an active Facebook page. have, what was the last count? 888 members on our Facebook. So, and we do set some limits there. We don't just let anybody join our group. But there's obviously a lot of interest, and we appreciate that. It's a great opportunity for those of you who are on Facebook to learn and share information, share your photographs, or learn from others. And so it's an active group from that standpoint. And we also have an email list. Are you sending your notebook around, or will you?
Not yet, but I will right now.
Wendy's going to pass around a notebook. You can sign your name in. We'd appreciate that so we can keep count of how many are here. If we do have an email list. If you don't currently get our emails, you are welcome to sign your or put your email address down, and then we can add you to our group list. And we send announcements out about our meetings, and we have a field trip periodically.
So I'll start here, it can go all the way to the back and then over and then back up. And, you know, it helps us tell Town Square, you know, they kind of like to know how big we are too. And I think they're very happy that we are here because it's another way to have people exposed to Town Square. It's a great organization and they're very kind to us.
We do have periodic field trips, and we will be having one coming up a little later this month. One of our annual field trips is here at the Puckian Marsh, which is a DNR-owned site, and it's a natural area. So we'll send out an announcement about that. We don't have a certain date picked up. That's one advantage of having a smaller group and having contact information is that we can sometimes wait till just a few days ahead and make sure the weather is going to be good. You know, we don't want the wind blowing 40 miles an hour. That kind of takes the fun out of it. But we'll let you know about our Puckian Marsh field trip. That's always fun. We walk down this lane down to the marsh, and we especially enjoy watching and listening to the Wilson snipe. They do their winnowing display overhead. And then if we stay late enough in the evening, we'll get American woodcock doing their displays also. But we'll get lots of other marsh birds there also. We are now in April, and we're approaching approximately midway through the spring migration. So things are starting to pick up. We get more and more new birds showing up every week. This is one of the recent birds that's been showing up for the last week or so, the osprey. And it seems like there are more than ever this year. We have, I think, maybe 8 different platforms in the area now where the ospreys can nest. So it's always fun to see them coming in. One of the platforms that we put up, we think the eagles have taken over. Usually that's not been a problem. This is the first time I think that the eagles have taken over an actual osprey platform. That's the one in Norwegian Bay.
Yes.
Some of you have probably been seeing some great blue herons flying around or getting along the edges of the marsh or the river. If you're on the lake or look at the lake periodically, you might be seeing Bonaparte's gulls, which are really attractive this time of year. It's a small gull, and they have this, the adults have this black head or hood and real flashy looking wings. And flying around over the lake right now. Belted kingfishers are coming in. They catch minnows, small minnows, and feed along the streams and lake shores in our area. They'll nest here. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers have been coming in for the last week or so. And a lot of them are passing through, but we do get some sapsuckers that nest here year-round, or I should say in the summertime. But they'll drill little holes in the side of a tree, and the sap comes out, and they'll eat the sap, and they will eat any insects that are attracted to the sap also. Tree swallows have been starting to show up also. If you guys have bluebird trails or bluebird boxes, you've probably been seeing tree swallows attracted to those boxes. They kind of go back and feed in the marshes and lakes when you have a cold day or cold morning like this. But if we get a warmer day, we've got some coming up, you'll see more tree swallows back around the boxes. Gold-crowned kinglets, tiny little bird. They're coming through right now, and they will continue through the month and into the beginning of May. And they'll kind of, we'll start getting more and more ruby-crowned kinglets also, which is another type of kinglet with a different head and facial pattern.
Golden crowned kinglet weighs about the size of 2 nickels. Yet it'll survive nights of 20 below.
Wow.
And they only eat insects. They don't change their diet in the winter like chickadees do and go to seeds and nuts. They'll only eat insects.
So it's a neat bird. They're very active. You know, they'll hover sometimes when they're feeding on or foraging in the branches. And then the warblers are just getting started too. The first yellow-rumped warblers are showing up. And those are probably the most common of our warblers, usually the earliest. And they'll continue to increase until the first week of May or so, then they'll start tapering down a little bit. Pelicans also. Anybody been seeing any pelicans around? Yeah, a lot of hands up. They are a huge bird. That's by weight, I think it's the largest bird we have, maybe along with whooping cranes. Massive birds, and I think it's 8 foot or close to 9 foot wingspan on those guys. But they're very graceful flyers. So take a few minutes here and listen to whatever you guys have been seeing. Do you have any, not just birds, but wildlife as well, nature? Yes?
There's a huge eagle's nest up in the tree. It looks like 6 feet wide.
Wow. Yeah,
It's
eagles.
across the street from where the cars could go into the lot there on E.
Okay.
It's really in front of the first house there.
You saw an eagle on it.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, wow.
Really cool.
Maybe they're gonna take over another nest too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another big bird that's been increasing over the years, along with the ospreys. What else? What else have you been seeing? Yeah.
So loons at Partyville.
Loons. That's right. Park Lake always gets a lot of loons in the springtime there. Gary?
There's been a loon hanging around right by the boat landing. I mean, he comes this far away.
Wow.
Fishing, I've seen him catch a couple of bluegills. But he's really close, he was there 2 days ago.
Right in Green Lake,
Right.
in the bay.
Where the big walkway is right around.
Yeah. Yes?
We had pileated woodpeckers hanging out, we cut a couple of trees down and they made just huge holes in the stumps. And then I was walking across the yard and I noticed a hole and I thought it had been a chicken hole. And there was a swarm of little snakes had just come out.
Oh, wow.
20 or so snakes. They were all, starting to separate.
Yeah, yeah.
And then a few minutes later, you saw a hawk go by with one in his mouth.
Yeah.
Get some more.
Yeah, some of the hawks
I've never
love
seen
to eat
that
snakes. Yes?
We were watching a pair of sandhill cranes across White Creek for a bit. There's an artesian well that empties into it right in that spot, and it was all rusty because it's a lot of iron. And it looked like they were picking up leaves or something and scrubbing themselves with it. So I Googled crane preening, and it said that they will frequent rusty mud areas and stain their feathers with it so that they can camouflage themselves because their feathers are gray.
Yes. It's quite amazing that they do that, but after they molt, you know, in the fall, they're all in their fresh feathers and they're all gray, real pale gray color. But this time of year when you see them, they're rusty brown color for the most part. But they paint their feathers, but you'll notice the part they can't reach is their upper neck. So that part stays gray, but down below that, they paint their feathers.
Sometimes they arrive back here painted.
Yes, right. Sometimes in migration or in the winter they do that.
Oh,
Yes.
there's a cut, okay. We saw a mink this morning.
A mink?
Yeah,
Oh, neat. Where was that?
right on the shoreline, north side of the
One
lake.
of the channels?
No, right on the,
Spring
right on the
Grove
lake.
Road.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
There's a question back there, yeah.
Now,
What's the status of the bluebird migration?
Saw one.
they're around. They're kind
You know,
of
when there's
being held back a little
seats
bit
right
by
on
the
that
cool
side, if you go
weather.
up that side.
But once we get to, you know, the warmer days coming up, we'll see more of them coming to the boxes.
I found it.
There's been some fear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, a lot of our bluebirds winter in the south, the southern half of the
Oh, there's
U.S.
somebody there.
And they had some tough winter down there. They had snow and cold temperatures, and sometimes when that's happened, it's taken a toll on some of those birds that winter in that area, like bluebirds. So time will tell exactly how many will be coming back, but we're hoping there'll be lots of them. Yes?
Did you hear about the bird flu that hit the cranes in Indiana?
Yeah.
Sad.
Very sad. Yeah, it's big die-offs in some areas. It's highly contagious. It gets passed between individuals.
Hey, Tom, could you explain where Puckian Marsh is? Somebody asked.
I will post a map, a link to a Google map, and also directions.
So if you aren't on our Facebook page or you don't get our email, make sure you give us your email, because whatever we put on Facebook, we put in our email. Because a lot of people don't do the Facebook thing, so whoever asked me.
But just quickly, it's off of Highway CC. CC goes north from Highway J, and it kind of does a big semicircle, and then back to J again. And the Puckian Marsh is right kind of in the middle of that, and then the Puckian Marsh Road sort of dead ends right there on CC. And then there's a gravel lane that goes down, and that's where the goods go down maybe 100 yards, and then there's a parking area right there. So it's not that hard to find.
North of Green Lake.
Northwest of Green Lake.
So I haven't seen a pelican yet. Yeah, no, I don't know why I can't see a big bird up there.
Highway A.
I did see a brown creeper. So this would be a good time of year to see brown creepers. They move through with the kinglets. And they can be just randomly any place where there's a pretty big tree. This was the conference center, where Prospect Road turns off of the entrance road and kind of goes up that hill. It has the overlook over the golf course. There it was on the side of the tree. But when they're moving through, they can just be in random places. If you go into Oshkosh on 44 and go over 41, you get to that stoplight where the Goodwill is kind of to the northwest, and the BP station is kind of to the airport side. And it was about this time of year, a few years ago, I pulled into the BP to get gas, and there's a little excuse of a tree between the gas station and the stoplight, and there was a brown creeper. Right there in the middle of the concrete desert.
It's a bird that can be easily be missed, because they blend in, they look like a part of the tree trunk.
Also, getting a chance now, but we really could use some more crane counters this weekend, Saturday.
I was gonna get to that in a minute here, John.
Yep.
So announcements, first of all, Wendy was gonna do a few words about our Green Lake Bird Festival, which is coming up in a couple weeks, a little more.
Yes. Okay, ordinarily, we don't really want to put we don't want to put any pressure on anybody, but this time of the year, right before our Bird Festival, which is going to be the 25th and 26th. The 25th is in the evening, Birds and Brews. Both of these events will be up in the ballroom, and that's a social. Bring your non-birding friends or your non-nature friends, and so bring them into the fold. It's just a social. We have a raffle, we have food, and we have a game or a little mixer, we want to call it. No pressure on anybody to have to answer the question, but they do have fun. We generally have fun, and it's a nice social for all of us to be casual. That's on Friday evening, and then Saturday morning, we always start with an early morning field trip to Sunnyside, and then we come back to Town Square, and this year we have two fabulous speakers. One, the first gal, her name is Lisa Gometz. She is the coordinator for SOS, Save Our Songbirds, so she's going to talk about the 3 things we can do to save our backyard songbirds. And then Bill Volkert, and many of you know who Bill Volkert is. He is often on Larry Mueller's show. He's a good friend of ours from a long, long time ago, and he was a speaker at one of our very first bird festivals, and he banded birds at Sunnyside. So he's going to talk about migration. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about tonight briefly is that we always look to our members for snacks for Friday night. No pressure, no pressure. Really, I'm serious, because, we all eat too much anyway. But we love to eat. And then if anybody has any ideas or they want to contribute a raffle prize, doesn't have to be birding. We used to kind of do how about birding things? But I don't think it's necessary to do birding things. If you have something that you want to put together and you feel like, oh, I would like to donate that, as long as we have your name, because we like to send thank yous, we really do. Name, and if you have any idea about a raffle. So even though you might not know what you want to do now, I'll probably put this call out for food and raffle items on our Facebook page in the coming days. So I'm going to pass this around just like the other thing. They're both little side-ups here. Okay, that's I think all I have to say. Mary, did I get it all?
Yeah.
Okay. Mary's our treasurer, and she's been very organized person for this raffle. Yes.
Wendy, anything you put on Facebook, would you be able to also send us an email?
Absolutely.
Okay, about what you're just talking about, the raffle and the...
You bet I will. Mike? Oh, I had you.
No.
Okay, there you go. Thanks.
Okay, so that's the Bird Festival. It'll be that Friday night, the 25th, the social event, and then Saturday morning, field trip, and then presentations in Town Square.
It's over by
Hope you can
noon,
join us.
generally,
Done
on
by
Saturday.
noon.
Yes.
And then, coming up this Saturday is the annual Midwest Crane Count. John, come on up. John is the coordinator for Green Lake County,
Friday night.
and he's always looking for volunteers.
Yes, we have a lot of good spots. Well, most of the good spots are still available. We had put out an email to some of our past counters, and I got some responses about, yeah, we'll be there. And then all of a sudden I got some emails from some that said, we're not going to be back in town yet. They thought they would be, but they're not going to be. So that opened up a few more things. And somebody saw me after last month's meeting, and I hope they were going to email you to get my contact. I don't know if that ever happens.
So if I got something, I would have passed it
Yeah,
on.
I know, yeah. So if you can help on Saturday, let me know. I know there's always people who complain about, why do the birding things always early in the morning? Because people said that. Because you've heard that message before. Yes. But Wendy doesn't mind getting up early.
I'll be at work.
Yeah. But some people, like, not all birding activities are early in the morning. But this one is. But it's only for 2 hours. It's 5:30 to 7:30, and then you can nap the rest of the day. Unless you have a 10 o'clock meeting like I do that day. It's 5:30 to 7:30, and you get an area to go to, and you kind of count the cranes you see and or hear, and maybe note if you see any kind of, like you see them painting themselves, or dancing, or if they were feeding here, or you can put down any kind of interaction you see. Question?
What's the purpose of the count?
Well, the purpose of the count is for the International Crane Foundation to kind of keep tabs of where things still are population-wise, which we know the sandhill crane population is far better than it was like 3 decades ago. Far better than it was 3 decades ago. That is not the same for all birds. They also can keep track of, especially if we get good coverage, habitat changes. Like we had cranes here 20 years ago, and now we got nothing because it's not habitat anymore. Things like that. Or maybe this habitat has come back. And also now, certain select counties can let the ICF know where the whooping cranes are. And that's really what happens here and a few other select counties. Tom usually is in the White River Marsh, so he has the best chance of getting whooping cranes. If he doesn't see or hear them, well, he'll hear from us. But no, Tom always finds whooping cranes up there, and I'm usually north of Lake Puckaway, and I would say 2 out of the last 5 years, I was surprised to have a pair of whooping cranes show up and fly right over my head. So that was unexpected, but that is something that is a little bit unique to us in a few other select counties. Like Sauk County, I think, has some nesting whooping cranes.
Juneau County.
Juneau, yeah.
You see that.
Yeah. So that's the main reasons I know of. Yeah. So I have a map of areas. So if anybody wants to spend part, you don't have to spend all the 2 hours. If you don't get up at 5:30, if it goes 5:30 to 7:30. So if you don't get up to 7:15, you want to spend 15 minutes, don't tell me you only spent 15 minutes, pretend like you did 2 hours. It's close enough, because if you're in a nesting area, they probably didn't move a lot. They're probably still there feeding or building nests or whatever. But if you can get up and get a good chunk of the 2 hours in, and there's an area close to your house, that's fine. I wouldn't mind if somebody lived right there north of Lake Puckaway in one of those areas, because it's an interesting area to be at those 2 hours in the morning, but I hate to drive over there, because I feel like I'm in a pinball machine dodging the deer all the way. If I could do something closer to home, that would be safer. We had somebody, we lost one of the areas that was assigned because somebody was on their way out and they hit a deer, and they never got to their area. So that you got to be careful if you're driving.
You don't mean lost, literally, figuratively.
No, he never got to the spot, so we didn't get there to count. Maybe he's still lost.
So you have specific sites already identified?
Yeah, yes we do. Well, it doesn't mean we can't. Probably could add a site, but there's plenty of areas that they've delineated on the map they've given me, and it's probably everything is fairly close to somebody's house.
They're all generally about a square mile.
Yeah.
Size. Jerry and I will do it again. We're just not asking for it, so that's what we want to do.
Okay.
And I can't remember what we did with that.
So if you're interested in participating in the grain count, come and find John before you leave tonight, and we can